I'm Kaitlyn Bristowe. Your session is now starting. Welcome to Grape Therapy, everybody. I'm your host, Kaitlyn Bristowe, straight off the racetrack. Sorry, had to just get here on time. But I have on the podcast today New York Times bestselling author Nicole Lapin. She is CEO and founder of Money News Network and the host of a chart-topping financial literacy podcast called Money Rehab. She's here to make us all feel a little more confident about our finances, talking about our finances. Should we talk about them at the beginning of dating? She has a bunch of really great advice, easy for you to break down, and I really think you'll enjoy this one. Thank you for coming on the podcast and being here today. You are like, I wish you could be in my pocket at all times so I could just pop you out whenever I need you, because I didn't get that gene. I don't have that brain. I am not a big numbers gal. I just can't do it. I need help all the time. And I feel like so many people can benefit from your podcast and your knowledge. So right off the bat, I think a lot of people get nervous talking about money. And I don't know why, but I feel like it's an intimidating conversation, whether you feel like you have it or you don't. It's just, I always find it hard to navigate, which is obviously why you are here. So let's start off with the topic of financial anxiety.
My favorite topic.
It's a thing.
It's a huge thing. Kaitlyn, so when you first started that little spiel out, which I've heard many, many times, not to say that you're not special, but a lot of us feel the same way about financial anxiety, and that we're not numbers girls, or we're bad at math, or we don't have enough money. We don't have enough money to start. We're too old to start. These are all stories, constant stories that we tell ourselves to stand in the way of getting our financial lives together. And these are all stories. Like, it is so far from the truth. Like, I started as a poetry major. Like, I am the least likely person to be talking about finances, like, much less have my finances together. Forget about teaching other people about it. So truly, like, if I could do it, anyone could do it.
Okay, now is this because you found a way to easily break it down and help people understand? So through that, you got to like learn from somebody. Like, did you have a mentor?
No, I just lied to get a job.
Hey, my assistant lied to get a job. Maggie, calling her out right now. She's right here. She said, she told me she lived closer than she did because she wanted to commit to the bit, and I believed her, but it all worked out. Yeah, I loved it. And also, we were just laughing about a guy who lied to us about valet. I just got a ticket in the mail, a parking ticket, and Maggie's like, hey, this is from when we went out for my birthday. And we were both like, oh, that guy didn't even work for valet. He was like, oh yeah, I'll park your car. Parked it. We Venmo'd him instead of getting a ticket. And he got me a parking ticket. So you know what? I respect his hustle.
What the hell?
Yeah, there you go. He lied and he got the job done. He didn't steal my car.
That's wild. Now, we're not here to like advocate serious lying, just to be clear.
Yes, no.
But like, girls gotta eat, right? So I was 18. I needed a job. I wanted to be in broadcast journalism. I went to school for broadcast journalism, like after I was a poetry major, and wanted to be a writer and sit under a tree and write all day long. Then I realized I needed to pay the bills and like make money. And so I thought that getting a job in broadcast news was going to do that. Didn't realize that my first job was $18,000 a year. And back in the day, I had to go to all these small markets to work my way up, like Lexington, Kentucky, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and all of that. So I wanted a job in Milwaukee at the CBS station. And I bothered the station chief in Chicago for a million years to try and get an interview. And I was like, here's how I can get to Milwaukee every day, kind of like your assistant. I was like, I know how to get to Milwaukee. He's like, you don't know geography. I didn't. I grew up in California. I didn't own socks before I went to college. So that was a bad lie. And he said, so you don't get that job. And I was really bummed. And then he said, do you know anything about business news? And I grew up in an immigrant family. Never talked about money. My boyfriend in high school said he wanted to be a hedge fund manager. I thought the dude wanted to be in gardening. Like, when I tell you I was the most clueless, Kaitlyn, anyone has ever been about money in the history of the world, like, it would not be an overstatement. I then said to his question of, do I know about money news? Absolutely. I love money news all day, every day. And I knew nothing. Whoa. Zero things. And I started on the floor of the Chicago Merc which I thought was a mall, by the way. It's the stock exchange in Chicago. And I realized then that money is a language just like anything else. We just don't have a Rosetta Stone for the language. And once we learn the language, then it feels so obvious. Like, how did we not know that before? But it's just like if you went to Japan and you didn't speak Japanese, you'd be really confused. If you went to Wall Street and you don't speak the language of money, you'd be really confused. And money is the most taboo thing in society still. Forget about like sex, politics, bikini waxes. Like, we'll talk about everything at the dinner table with our girlfriends before we talk about money. Like, we'll get into some serious personal stuff. And as soon as money comes up, it's like crickets. And I'll say like, girl, you just told me about your landing strip and this is crickets?
Right.
Like, what do you mean? You can't talk about your savings or what you're making. And you're absolutely right. Like, money is a mind, whether you have it or you don't, it is going to cause anxiety. So you might as well deal with it.
I feel like we sometimes like feel shame around it if we don't have enough or as much as our friends have. And then there's the societal pressures and comparisons because of social media. Well, that person's on a trip and that person's living their dream job, so I must not be doing enough or making enough. And I feel like there's so many things in our world that contribute to financial anxiety.
Totally. And financial trauma is real. Like, we all have some sort of financial trauma, even if your family like sat around the table and read the Wall Street Journal to each other, like you learned about stocks and bonds. You still have societal trauma. Maybe you're in your friend group, everyone got into a bunch of debt, or maybe they hid purchases from their significant others, or you saw your parents doing that or fighting about money or like spending frivolously, or on the flip side, like not spending enough and, you know, and being too like penny pinching about money. So every which way, like there's some sort of financial trauma that has dictated how you live your life now, or in the macro sense, like if you grew up in the dot-com bubble or the housing crash, like I saw my family's house get foreclosed on. And so that impacts, regardless of how much money I have, how I look at home buying or not. You know, I had serious financial trauma with my family growing up, and that has dictated how I approach money and like the fears that I have. And they're irrational fears. Just like you said, I'm not a numbers girl.
I'm just not
based in fear, shame, guilt, like all the psychology. You don't need to be a numbers girl. Like the stuff to get your financial life together, a fifth grader can do, honestly. It's the humanities part that is the most complicated.
I will say, and then that's why, like, for example, you are a resource for people to help others if they're sitting there having shame around not being a numbers gal. Like there's ways to find tools. And are there any resources that you recommend for people who struggle? Because I bet everybody listening right now is going, no matter what situation they're in, I bet they're going, oh my gosh, I have that. Oh my gosh, that's me. So do you have resources for people that struggle?
All of my books are 12-step plans because the first step to any recovery is admitting you have a problem. And honestly, the only problem we can't fix, especially money problem, is the one we don't admit we have. And so the first step to any recovery is like really saying what your problem is, letting that problem breathe and speak, because often we suffer more in imagination than in reality. And especially about money, like we make up all these stories. The first time I filed my taxes, I thought I was going to jail. Like, I think a lot of us do, right? We go to this extreme, like this worst case scenario, or having a conversation with your significant other about money, or getting your friend to pay you back, or like, what does that look like? And that causes a lot of anxiety. And so oftentimes it looks crazier and more wild in your imagination than it actually does in reality.
Okay, I'm wondering if the stress of the holidays is hitting you hard. Finding gifts for loved ones, getting together with family, that can be stressful. Traveling. Well, I've got an insider secret for you to help you live your healthiest life and stress a little less. And you can beat the stress before it beats you by adding 2 little products into your daily routine. Just Thrive Probiotic with the stress-busting, mood-uplifting power of Just Calm. You've heard me talk about them many times on the podcast. The Just Thrive Probiotic supports digestive, immune, and total body health, and it is like a little personal gardener for your gut. Plus, it can be opened and sprinkled into any food or drinks, so it's just the perfect probiotic for the whole family. And you can pair it with Just Calm for that next level mood support. Just Calm has been proven to promote a healthy response to everyday stress, encourage a balanced mood, drive mental clarity, focus, and alertness, and even support energy and good sleep. So check out the Good Gut Health episode from December 21st so you can learn more about Just Thrive. And if you're ready to up your wellness game, you can get 20% off a 90-day bottle of Just Thrive probiotic at Just Calm when you go to justthrivehealth.com with promo code VINE. Take control of your health this year with Just Thrive. How would you have a conversation with a friend if you felt like they did owe you money? And some people get so crippled by that conversation. How would you approach it?
See, and these are the things. It's not the number stuff, the math. Like, you don't need a graphing calculator for this stuff, I promise. It's those conversations that are most anxiety provoking. And it's one of the number one questions I get asked, because there's an old adage, like, if you lend your friend money, you decide what you want more, the friend or the money. And oftentimes, like, it ruins relationships, it ruins friendships, it ruins family relationships. Like, it causes all sorts of other stress upon like distress that's happened. And so when you're approaching a friend to pay you back, I often say, like, address it not in a business kind of capacity, because you're not working with a bank, you're working with a good friend, but be really clear about like timelines and like methodology for how that person's going to pay you back. Or, sometimes it's most aggravating when somebody borrowed money from you and then you see them on social media, like going on all these trips and doing all these things. And you're like, wait a minute, like, I just lent you $100. What's up? Clearly you have the money. And so bringing up something like that so it doesn't fester and metastasize and become worse and actually ruining a friendship, you can say like, hey, it looks like you got on your feet again. That's so awesome. Like, I'm trying to do this thing for my business, or whatever you want to say. I'm trying to invest in myself. Like, I'd love that $100 back, and if they say that it's still a really hard time, talk about a payment plan potentially, not in like you are working with a bank type of way, but say, hey, every couple weeks, does this work to do like $25, every 2 weeks? Like, I can send you a PayPal request. I can send you a Venmo request. Like, is that easiest? So you're bringing in some of this like framework to help with the anxiety, but you're not being like too clinical about it.
I'll never forget when I lived with one of my girlfriends. She was one of the smartest people I'd ever met in my life. And she taught me like a little bit about saving money, because I didn't grow up talking about money. Our family talked about anything and everything, but not really about money. And I didn't understand certain things. I didn't get approved for a credit card until I was like 33 years old, because I just never cared about credit and didn't do anything about it. Like, I didn't know any better. And I can't even believe it looking back how much nobody taught me. No, it was just not talked about. And my girlfriend, I wanted to go on a trip with her, and I was like, well, I don't have the money. She goes, well, I could lend you the money, but then you could pay me back, but like a certain interest rate, like a credit card. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it made no sense to me, but she set that boundary really clear to me that if she was going to lend me the money, here's how it was going to work for me to pay her back. And that was like, at the time, quite interesting, because I was like 19 years old and I was like, but I feel like as adults, we could have that kind of conversation where you just set that like precedence at first.
For sure. And by the way, that's really smart, because there is a cost to capital, right? She could be, instead of lending you that money, she could be putting that money to work. And one of the most beautiful forces out there is the force of compound interest, which we often see used against us in the financial system with credit card debt, where it escalates and snowballs out of control. That same force can be used in your favor to grow your money in the stock market. Like, over time, the stock market has yielded 7% adjusted for inflation, right? So instead of giving you that money, she could have put that money to work, and maybe she charges you less in interest, but like, having capital, having cash is really valuable for the things that you can do with it and like how it can work for you. And when I discovered that, that's what got me hooked. I was like, damn, I work so hard for my money. Like, it's time it returned the favor.
Yes, I'm just starting to learn. Yeah, I'm starting to learn about that. Well, I will say my ex was very much in finances and so smart, and he helped me so much. Like, I still say to him, I'm like, God, out of all of our years in this relationship, like, You really helped me with a business mindset and getting my money to start working for me and certain things that I would have never known. And then he's like, cool, you taught me about fart jokes. So we're not really even, but no, I'm just kidding.
Same,
But
same, but different.
same. But for people who are feeling, and I think I hear a lot of my friends talking about this and people, even online, for people feeling overworked and underpaid, how do you suggest they approach their employer? Like, do you give advice to people for standing up for themselves and asking for a raise or tips on how to do that?
For sure. And I think the most intimidating part of that is like actually what to say. So in my book, I think it's my second book, Boss Bitch, which talks about more like career negotiating for yourself. It just like lays out, they will say this, you say that. And I do the same thing for negotiating. I think I talk about this in Rich Bitch and Miss Independent, you know, when you're negotiating for your utilities or your credit card APR or anything like that, like here are the things to say, because I think we can all now get down with the idea that you should have these hard conversations. And once you buy into that, you're like, damn, I don't know what to say after that.
Right.
So when you're having a conversation for a raise, like there are different permutations, right? Like when you first get a job and you've got an offer and you're trying to negotiate that, there's different kind of leverage that you have around that. If you have been working for a certain amount of time and you want to raise, like there's a different conversation there. But you know, we can take either if you want. If you're just getting a job for the first time, you have leverage because it's really expensive to hire. I mean, think about the process that you went through to hire an assistant, right? Mm-hmm. Like once you found your person, like that's valuable to you to put yourself in your employer's shoes, right? Like if you have to start from scratch, like it's going to cost you time, it's going to cost you money and all of that stuff. And so there usually is wiggle room when you're negotiating that, but also think of an overall compensation package. So not just base salary, but also perks, you know, so paid time off. If you then calculate like what your daily rate would be, if you have more paid time off, that increases your worth because that will like increase your day rate because you're working less time. Or, you know, transportation, or, you know, we're all working from home now, but before those days, like those types of perks working from home would help for not paying for a babysitter or a dog walker or whatever, having some equity options, other things that for an employer, like it's really important to put yourself in the other person's shoes for any of these hard conversations. And so those types of things are tax write-offs or expenses. And so that's not really huge skin off their back, and it could help you. So think of your overall compensation package and not just being monetary perks that you're asking for. And then when you're at work and you already have a job, honestly, my best advice is like, be really honest with yourself. Like, would you give yourself a raise? Nobody deserves a raise. Nobody deserves anything. And as an employer myself, you're an employer too. Like, you're running a business. You're not running a charity, right? So if your assistant or anyone who works for you came to you and said, like, I want a raise, like, why? Can you show me like how you've created more business for me? Like, if you're asking me for an expense account, right? I want to see as an employer, okay, like did that coffee or did that lunch yield to some business or some closing of business? I will give you all the coffee and all the land. Like I will give you the hugest expense account if you're showing me that that created some ROI for me, right? And so it's really keeping track. We keep track at work of a lot of different KPIs, like key performance indicators for our job to hit like metrics and benchmarks. And we create like presentations for ourselves, but we don't do that for our own personal growth and development. Like you're creating a presentation maybe to present for the company, but when you're going in for this conversation, be like, here are the things that I've done. Your boss has a boss has a boss. Everybody's like looking out for themselves and needing to have their own back and getting their own raises. So they're not seeing like all the added value you've created. And that's why it's important to come up with that like in a package for yourself when you're presenting your case.
Yeah, you need like a PowerPoint presentation onto why and how. And that's, I do think that's really important. And I say somebody sat me down and they're like, I want to raise. I feel like I'd go, okay, like how do I get the backbone to say, well, what do you do for me? Like, I feel like again, that's something that I feel like I would be nervous to have that conversation. And I think that that might just stem around the fact that I've never talked about money until recently, and maybe it's just uncomfortable for me. So basically, I would just take your advice from earlier with the resources and read your books to get through that.
We can also do role playing. I think it's really fun to practice, like if, whether it's with a friend, whether it's in a mirror, whether it's with your dog, you know, starting those conversations, because they're so scary in our minds, like they're not as bad in reality as they are in imagination. There's two schools of thought when it comes to negotiating. One is to throw out a big number, or one not, because you're potentially negotiating against yourself. So if somebody wants to offer you, like, I don't know, for easy math, like $100,000, and you're like, well, I want $110,000, right? You don't know if they actually could have gone up to $150,000 unless you let them throw out that first number. You don't know like what the range is, right? And that's why I also think it's really important to talk to your friend group about this stuff. It's like pricing your house without knowing the comp of the area. You're shooting in the dark, like you're not getting the information. And that's why I think it's, you know, so taboo. But if you want to have a hard conversation of any kind, you have to go first, I often say. And so, you know, on my show, in books, I talk about my salaries all day long. Like in my books, Kaitlyn, I literally talked about how much I made for that book.
Really?
I didn't ask, but I was like, if I'm telling other young women to talk about their finances and talk about money, they're probably reading this and be like, woman, well, what did you make for this book? Because I would be wondering that too.
Yeah, that's true.
And so somebody has to go first.
Circling back, I was thinking about this when, you know, you said you went from poetry to finance, and now I don't know if you would say you have your dream job, but so many of us love the idea of working our dream job and how to get there. But for some, like, you know, that might mean starting from scratch. And some people are so intimidated to start your own business because they either think the grass is always greener and it's going to be so easy, or they think, I don't have the ability to do this. I don't know where to start. I don't know how to start. I have a family. How am I supposed to have time? How does one overcome that fear of failure and try and chase something that is their dream job?
So I grew up in a really broken home, needed to start working early on. You know, my father died of a drug overdose when I was 11. Like my mother pieced out. I, you know, never had backup plan. And so failure wasn't an option for me. And when I said yes to that job as a finance reporter, it was, you know, because I needed a job, but I hated like finance stuff. I thought, you know, men on Wall Street, and they were all men. You know, I have wild stories of being like Wolf of Wall Street style on the floor of the exchange with all these guys. Like the women's bathroom was like a closet. You know how normally the women's bathroom is really big compared to those dudes? There was no women there. And so,
oh my gosh,
you know, I said yes because I needed that job. And I thought that this was like a bunch of greed and that I wasn't doing anything important with my life. All of this stuff. And my dream job, like at that point, was to be a poet or to be a writer. And like, I just didn't have the luxury to do that. And so I often argue with these entrepreneurial experts who go and say like, go do what you love. Like, if not now, when? YOLO, FOMO, whatever, yo. I didn't have that luxury. Like, that's really cool. And if you had a trust fund, or like if your parents are great and like give you money, that is amazing. Like, I'm not mad at you. Like, I'm a little jealous, but like, I'm not mad. I just didn't have that option. And so I found my dream job, but it ended up being the exact same job. So instead of hating on those opportunities that I had, because they were the opportunities, like I couldn't start from scratch. I had to use like the resources and the platform that I had at the time. And I looked at like what that was and what was important to my employer at the time and what was important to me. And I found the shaded part of that Venn diagram. And I found like making a difference, writing, that was all really important to me. I wanted to be like Christiane Amanpour at CNN and go report on the, you know, war and be at the White House. And like, I was like, I want to make a difference. I'm just here talking about the Dow and like what numbers are doing. And this is so stupid. And I hate my life. And like, I'm doing nothing. And this is the worst job I could possibly think of. But then I realized, like, no, you know what? What I'm doing is reporting the first draft of economic history. The economy, like, drives all of these sectors. Like, the economy, if you want to get to the heart of any story, follow the money trail, whether it's personal or like in the news or anything. It's truly money motivated a lot of things, whether in the history books or in our own lives. And so when I started viewing it that way, I was like, you know what? I became a writer. So I was an anchor on CNN and CNBC and Bloomberg, talking to a lot of old rich white dudes about money and like how to get richer. And I was just like, I felt so empty inside. And to other people, that might have looked like a dream job. And to me, it was like a nightmare of a job.
Wow.
Until I had the very same job and I just changed my viewpoint on it. I just changed my perspective on it. So oftentimes I say, like, I became a writer, just not the kind I expected. And so writing finance books were not the books that I wanted to write. But I also, like, there's no shame in feeding your family. There's no shame in paying your bills. And that's really important. And we talk a lot about self-care, and like, I love a deep tissue massage just as much as the next girl. But I also think that self-care and taking care of your bills and going to the doctor, and like, not fun, sexy things, but like things that take care of you in other ways, are self-care. And I do think that, like, you can find passions in other areas. Like, the only thing that you can only get at work is money, unless you're doing some weird stuff, which is like not, I'm not here to talk about, but like, you have to optimize for money at work. If you can also always find passions in other areas too. And so when people say, like, I'm not passionate about what I do, you know, being passionate about this might be a hot take, but like, you don't always have to be passionate about what you do, but you do have to support yourself, and you do have to be able to take care of yourself. And I continued to do what I do because I found that there was such a void, especially talking to women about money, and women were ending up in abusive relationships they couldn't get out of because they were too scared of having their own money and figuring this out. And they thought that they weren't a numbers person, or that they were too old to get started. And that's just not true. And money, like, it's not money, it's whatever you want to assign to that. But having the ability to leave any situation, job, relationship, like, that is what is important to optimize for. That is my dream above anything else.
It's cool too to think, like, switching your perspective in what you do, like a simple thought of, I did want to be a writer. Well, I can still do that. And, you know, you're doing it in a much different way now, but finding those little things that you actually still do love. And I think that's, a lot of people think if they're going to chase their dream job, it has to be worth leaving the other job for, or, you know, I better make all this money. But I feel like people don't know what they're getting themselves into, or they think they don't have the time. But it doesn't have to be this big crazy thing. It can be something that you're passionate about, like you said. But I want to know what people should know about owning their own business before diving into it.
That I definitely dive into in Boss Bitch. And what was interesting to me is that when I was first thinking about what that looked like, I came to it only from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Especially for women, we jump through a lot of different stages in our lives. Like, I don't think of a career as a ladder. I think of it more as like a rope swing or rock climbing. Like, I worked for a bigger company. I went off to work for myself. Like, I could be the CEO of my family. I could then go work for another company, and all these different permutations in between. You can become an intrapreneur, which is like an entrepreneur within a bigger company. When I worked at CNN, I started a series, and like, that was entrepreneurial. I did that like on my own, even though I was at a bigger company. I was like logging into my own little WordPress and doing my own thing. And so, you know, you can have different definitions of being an entrepreneur. But when I first burned my corporate bra, like, I would have told that girl to make sure she had like enough savings in the bank to really, like, I know it's not the thing you want to think about. Like, you want to think about the hopes and the dreams and the plots and the ideas, and those are important too. But like, having your own back to making sure that if this fails, like, it's not a hobby, it's a jobby at the end of the day. Like, if you can't make money doing it, it's something you do for funsies, and that's okay. Not everything you have to make money from. Like, when people say, I want to start a cupcake shop, I'm amazing at making cupcakes. Like, I make cupcakes for all my friends. They're, you know, it's worth having a business. Maybe, or maybe it's just like worth making cupcakes for people, because once it becomes a business, then you have to source flour, you have to do accounting, you have to do janitorial stuff. Like, it then doesn't become as fun. So like it's reconciling the passion that you have for different things and the work component of it, and not necessarily conflating the two.
There's some common misconceptions about being an entrepreneur. A lot.
So much. Yeah, I think that it's really about following your passion, like leading with passion. There's running a business right now for myself. Like, I have a whole network of financial shows now, and I have a bunch of folks that report to me, and I'll have some that say, like, I just want to do what I love every single day. And that is a huge, beautiful luxury. I don't do what I love every single day, even though I own my own business and I run it. You know, I think there's this idea that just because you created what that destiny is, that like every day is rainbows and butterflies. It's for sure not. Like, you know, when I'll say back to them, be like, do you think that this like ad read for whatever is like my passion? Do you think like I wake up in the morning and be like, you know what I want to do is like talk to you about like this insurance ad? No, but I have to keep the lights on. I have to pay the bills.
I literally thought I could just like start a wine brand and be like, well, I was on a TV show and I have this amount of followers on Instagram, so I can start a wine brand, can't I? And then I realized how much work. And now I've fallen in love with learning about business, but it's crazy how much more work it is than I ever thought. I am quite passionate about wine, but it's not like my job is sitting there and just sipping delicious wine when I feel like it, you know, but it is interesting just how much you learn about how hard it is. And I'll never forget, I think I've said this on a podcast before, but just this one meme I saw where someone was like, yeah, I didn't want to work a 9 to 5 anymore. I wanted to work for myself. So now I work 24/7. And it's like, it is so much work, you know?
It's true. And it's the numbers part. Like, I think the misconception, especially for women, is that like they have this creative idea, whether it's wine or clothes or something, and then they'll find like a finance person to deal with it, or they'll find like somebody to answer those questions. And you can in a lot of cases, but also like you need to know that stuff. Like, almost if you put a flashlight in your eye, like, you know, where were you, Kaitlyn, the night of, you know, March 7th, 1984? Like, you know, what is your EBITDA? What is your profit margin? What are your cost of goods? Like, these are things that like nobody is going to care at the end of the day about your money and your business as much as you, period. The end. It doesn't matter if you pay them. Like, this is, you know, the same when it comes to agents or managers or business managers or financial advisors or accountants or anybody who you think like, I'm going to outsource that to somebody else. You can, but that doesn't excuse you from not also understanding it if you had to. It happens also in marriages. Most women don't want to get their financial lives together proactively. It's reactively when their husband dies or they get divorced because they have to. And so just because somebody else in your family life deals with the bills, and that's fine, by the way, like divide and conquer is so cool. Whatever works for you, like I don't have to wake up in your life if that works for you, but it doesn't excuse not knowing where stuff is. So like if God forbid something happens to that other person, like you should be able to pick up that role, like if they get sick or anything. And so it goes the same for business partners or managers or other people in your financial life.
I feel like, I mean, we all know it, that the financial problems are always what happens when, you know, with divorce, or the number one cause. I don't even know if it's number 1 or 2 or 3, but it's probably up in number 1. But do you think it's because people aren't having the right conversations about it before or during or all the above? Prenups, are those, can we talk about those? Why do people find so much shame around prenups?
Well, I think for women in particular, it's because there's this idea that I hate so much. So it's like and again, I'm talking like heteronormative here, like whatever your situation is, I'm just doing that because it's easier for this conversation. But if this idea is like, he's making me sign a prenup. Well, no, like, first of all, people are marrying later in life. You have your own assets. Like, my prenup is ready to go. Like, I am protecting myself. Let's switch this conversation. Like, let's reframe it. somebody isn't making you do anything like that. You are protecting yourself. What about like you initiate a prenup conversation? Like, this is not a fear-based thing. Like, oh my God, what is he going to give me? Like, well, what are you going to give him? And also, how are you going to protect yourself against his debt? Or like, are you going to let the state decide? Like, maybe it's not a romantic, beautiful conversation, but you don't get car insurance or home insurance thinking like you're going to crash and die or like your house is going to burn down, but you get the insurance anyway. And so these, I think, are important conversations that like deserve reframing. These are conversations like that feel scary about money, but really are about like hopes, dreams, plans, and protecting yourself. Financial infidelity is one of the biggest causes of divorce or fights. And that just means like any other kind of infidelity, hiding or cheating or like keeping something from a significant other. And so when it comes to prenups, I'm a big fan. I think that for women, we should just take this conversation back and own it.
I like that. I actually really like that. Let's talk managing your money. What are your top 5 tips for managing your money?
So budgeting, I would say if you're going to just be starting out, I like to break down a spending plan into the 3 E's. So essentials, endgame, and extras, where 70% of your overall spending plan goes to the food, the housing, the transportation, all that stuff, 15% to the endgame, and then 15% to the extras. So like whatever does it for you, the latte, the mani-pedi, don't cut that stuff out. One of the biggest issues with starting to get on track is thinking that you need to cut everything out cold turkey. It's just like a regular diet. If you go on that's why I use spending plan in the same way as you would use eating plan instead of like a crash diet, because it allows you a Hershey's kiss so you don't end up noshing on a big old hunk of chocolate cake in the middle of the night because you're so hungry and so deprived. So if you allow yourself a spending plan, you're allowing yourself 4 lattes so you don't end up, mid-year binging on a Gucci purse because you didn't have any fun. Like, you need to account for fun. You need to put that in your spending plan.
I agree. I love that. I feel like I do that. Like, I just bought a new house, so I'm like, no more Starbucks for you. Like, I like start to like want to cut myself off from things that I enjoy and like do, because I'm like, you just spent so much money on this house, like you better not spend. But I'm like, that's so silly because I'm such a believer in just like alignment. Like, I feel like I'm supposed to be in this house. I feel the energy of this house. I feel like those are obviously lies I'm telling myself. Like, I can't do this because I did this, but I catch myself doing that, where truly, if you're doing things that you love that make you happy, then like you said, you're not waking up in the middle of the night and doing something that you would regret anyways because you're depriving yourself of other things. Like, I think we forget how small joys make big differences in our life.
For sure. In relationships, it's the little things that matter. Like, I think the secret to life, I had a Russian literature class in college that it said the secret of life, I'll just tell everybody, like, spoiler alert, was like it's the little things that matter the most. It's not these big things like I'll be happy when I get this or this house or this whatever. It's the small everyday joys and moments. When it comes to finances, it's the big stuff that matters. Like, cutting out a latte has never created a millionaire. Right? Cutting out little small indulgences has never gotten you faster to your financial life by clipping coupons or digging in the couch for coins or something like that. It's instead focusing on what your credit score is so that you're not spending as much for debt, whether it's on a mortgage or on your credit card. So credit scores work like a seesaw. The higher your credit score, the lower your interest rate is. And so if you do credit hygiene, you improve your credit score. That's like a big financial thing to focus on instead of trying to nickel and dime yourself. Then you're paying potentially thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars or more less in interest over your life. And so that's something to focus most of your attention on so that you can buy all the lattes, buy the Starbucks if you want.
See, I get overwhelmed, I guess, by things that I don't know enough about. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by credit scores or how to even check it. I didn't even know how to check my credit score until about 4 years ago. Like, again, like I feel like you break things down for people to really understand it. And even for people who get overwhelmed by credit score, like what should their steps look like to not feel so intimidated by it?
Annualcreditreport.com is a good place to get started. You can get your free credit reports if you're not signed up for another system. And the biggest component of your credit score is like payment history. So making sure that your bills are paid on time. I know that sounds patronizing. I'm certainly not trying to be, but even if you move and like you haven't transferred stuff over, stuff gets lost in the shuffle, it could be totally innocent, but that actually has the biggest bearing on your overall credit score, because basically what your credit score does is tells lenders, so that could be the credit card company, the bank giving you a mortgage or a car note or whatever, business loan, how responsible you are. So if you're showing them that you're like not paying stuff on time for whatever reason, then that's like lowering your credit score. So just make sure everything's, you know, on auto pay, stuff doesn't get lost. And then having a low utilization rate, which is just a fancy word for saying like, if you have $10,000 of a credit limit on your credit card, spending like $3,000, no more than that. Just because you have it doesn't mean you should be maxing it out. So this is an advanced tip. If you can get a credit limit increase and you can use it responsibly, it's better to take those increases, because your utilization rate, you can use more of that, a little bit more, not the full amount, but it shows that you're responsible by not like maxing it out of the full that you have access to.
And then I think a lot of people get, again, another thing that people get overwhelmed with is budgeting. Is there something like that, like a how-to budget for dum-dums? Like without, that's me being insecure. Like budgeting, how do you start?
Don't talk
if you want to create one
like that.
I know, I'm so sorry. She's really smart and great.
That goes back to, you know, the 3 E's that I broke that down to. If you are beyond just starting out, I would also pay attention, and I also use alliteration because, you know, I wanted to be a poet. So like some of the things that I wanted, I include into finance, where, you know, nobody said they belonged, but they make me happy. So I love alliteration. So the 3 E's become the 3 F's: family, finance, and fun, and really breaking down what your goals are. I like to do it in 1, 3, 5, 7, 10-year increments, so you can reverse engineer. Goals have price tags. Like a dream without a plan is just a wish, and wishes are amazing, but they don't pay the bills. And so figuring out like what you're going to do with that money is really, really important. Understanding what your why is, because I'll be, you know, at events or whatever, and somebody will say, well, like, cool. I know my goal. It's to have $1 million. I'm like, okay, like, what do you want to do with that $1 million? I don't know. Maybe you need more than $1 million. Maybe you need less than $1 million. First, figure out the life you want, and then reverse engineer to figure out how to get the money to live that life. But I think a lot of anxiety comes from not knowing answers to those questions. And those questions and those answers can change as your life changes and stuff happens, and it will. But knowing your destination is really important. It's like, you know, jumping in an Uber and being like, hey, Kaitlyn, like, we're going to a party in LA. And you're like, cool, like, where's the party? What am I wearing? Right. Is there food? Like, you have questions about this party, just like I would. We don't jump in an Uber and be like, hey, party in LA. We need the destination. We need the address. We need to know exactly where we're going. And so I think the same thing applies to finances. And that's the source of a lot of stress and anxiety, is because we don't actually answer the questions for ourselves. I used to have so much anxiety when people be like, what do you want to do in 5 years or 10 years? I'll be like, because I never answered the question.
Another thing I feel like people get stressed out about is always taxes, and people love getting a tax return, but explain to me why you shouldn't want a tax return.
It's your money coming back to you. People are like, party time. Like, I just got a tax refund, so I'm going to go like buy something really nice for me. Spoiler alert, that's just your money coming back to you. You like lent the government money at your friend that you lived with would have charged more money than the government like gave you back, right? Like the government is giving you your money back and not giving you interest on it. And so you're not appropriately doing your deductions or whatever, your filing, so that you're holding back and withholding the right amount of money or not, because you're getting a refund. Like, that is not something to celebrate. That's basically your money coming back to you.
Dang, I wish I would have known. Like, how did my parents are smart people. What they were like, yeah, you go get those hair extensions, girl. When I got my tax return back once, like, I feel like it helped me actually get to where being so like naive and blind to debt and like money and taxes and everything, like when it came to like, I would just be like, I don't know how I'm going to pay my rent next month, but I'll figure it out. Like, I feel like that mentality I had let me just think outside the box and go wherever I want and not think about consequences, where now I'm like, how did I get here? Like, realistically, I'm not quite sure, but I do feel like it was because I was so like aloof to all of it, and I'm grateful for it. But now I'm like, I love learning. Now I love learning because I want to set myself up for success for, if I have a family, if I get married. And I feel like even thinking about a new relationship for me, I'm like, how soon do you have the conversation about money these days? Because I'm 38. I want to talk about like, what are your political views, religions, like money? What, are you in debt? How much money are we talking? What are your goals? Like, I feel like I'm in a position in my life that I feel confident to ask those questions. But for people listening, what would you say? How open should you be right away in relationships with money?
Well, I don't think that this is an inquisition, or an interrogation on the first date. You're asking the credit score. Although there was a viral thing where a woman posted her credit score on Hinge or something like that, and it was really high. And I've long advocated for putting credit scores on dating apps.
Amazing.
Because like there are such arbitrary filters. Is it more important if he's 5'8" or 5'9", or if he has like a boatload of debt, or if he's irresponsible with money? And there's a lot of correlations between credit score and infidelity, driving records, and other things, because it just shows like general irresponsibility. And so I'm not saying like ask on a first date, but like maybe I would. But don't listen to that.
I actually like that.
It changes as your relationship progresses. Right? So like as you're moving in together, that's a different conversation. And you can get little cues as you're dating to see how responsible that person is. And I don't like to view these financial talks in this lens of like, it's so scary and like we need to sit down and like spread out our 401k statements and all this stuff. It's not about that. It's really like the life you want and making sure that it's compatible. You don't need to want the same things. They just need to work together.
Yeah.
And so when you're moving in with somebody, like whose name is the bills going to be under?
Mm-hmm.
If they're under that other person's name and they're being paid, you're not getting credit history for yourself, which is often where a lot of women get screwed. Or if they're in your name and they're not getting paid, then you're getting screwed in a different way. And then when you get married, right, it's the prenup discussion. It's who's paying for all the wedding stuff. That's a whole other podcast. And when you have kids, do you have a will? Do you have an advance directive? Like it becomes a more advanced discussion that you're having. And when you have kids, I think, your parents, and I'm sure those hair extensions were awesome and they did the best they could. And you're going to, you have more information now. So when you have kids, like it's going to be, and it is on parents to talk to their kids.
Totally.
We're not learning this stuff in school. We're learning a bunch of BS, like how to dissect a frog and the Pythagorean theorem, and I don't even know what.
It is so dumb. I do not understand why our school systems are not teaching us more about credit, about debt, about like the way the world actually works. It does not make any sense to me.
It makes zero sense to me. That's why I continue to do what I do. I started the money school because I was so tired of hearing, myself saying like, why is this not happening? And like, I want to go lobby for this. But it's true. Like I spent a lot of money on my brain. I went to college. Like I learned macroeconomic theories and stuff that's not relevant. I didn't learn how to write a business plan or do my taxes or do a budget, which would have been way more valuable, and so we have to do, I think, a combination of tough love for ourselves, like forgiveness for what our former selves didn't know because she didn't have the information, and that's okay. But like moving forward, it's not okay. You now have access to the information. So like buying hair extensions with a tax refund like is not okay moving forward, right? Because like you know better.
Yeah, no, I can't even believe. I should write a book. I should write a book about my 20s. It's actually comical and hilarious. Speaking of comical and hilarious, I always get guests to confess something to me on my podcast, and I hear you have a good one.
Oh my gosh, I have so many good ones.
Tell me everything.
I just like live in my financial confessionals. I love financial confessionals because like I've done all the mistakes, and so I get it. Like I got myself in all the debt. I said some wild stuff around business terms. Most recently though, I was on Good Morning America, and I like started on TV when I was really young. I was probably on air more than I was off air in my life. And I went on for like a regular segment talking about the debt ceiling and really complicated stuff and breaking this down and all of it. And then they were like, well, like, thanks for coming by. And I was like, you too.
I did that the other day at the airport. I did that same thing. Right? They were like, have a good flight. I was like, you too. And I was like, I've flown so many times and I've never said that. I've like made sure I didn't say that back and I just did. Oh, it's amazing.
Totally, or like happy birthday. Or like, good luck on the thing, on the procedure that you're doing. I don't know, you too, to the nurse. No, the nurse not.
I mean, it's a little worse when you're on Good Morning America in front of the country, but that's amazing. I hate it. I hate those little dumb, or when somebody waves at you and like you wave and they were waving to the person behind you, like those embarrassing things. God, I love it and I hate it at the same time.
I can't. My armpits are sweating thinking about it right now. So
that's incredible.
It's happening. I used to, by the way, wear like maxi pads under my Ann Taylor suits back in the day because like we didn't have cute suits when, you know, like we were getting our first jobs and whatnot. But yeah, I was so nervous that I would put like maxi pads under there. This was
you put them under here.
Yeah. You're like, I get how maxi pads work. No.
I thought you were telling me you were putting it down there for the sweat, like your vag sweat. And I was like, that's kind of smart. I was like, that's genius.
Yeah, wherever you want to put them. But I looked like I had it, like I was like a truck driver with like these pit stains. Because this stuff makes me nervous.
Oh, I know. What was I just doing like 2 days ago? Something happened to me. Damn it. Now I wish I could remember because it would have been a good confession. I did something where I like said something embarrassing and I started sweating. No, I won't be able to think of it. I'll think of it for my next podcast, but it's so hard to embarrass myself every week, twice a week on this podcast. But somehow I manage to do it quite often. Yeah.
And your producer was like, do you have an embarrassing story? I'm like, from like the last hour or the day or like, what are we talking about? Because it's just never ending.
What were you on Good Morning America for?
For these financial reports that I do, like a breakdown, like big financial stories and advice and stuff like that. And it was like, I've done it so many times. But yeah, it's like you're on autopilot at the airport, like telling the TSA person to have a nice flight. Like, we're just not thinking. It's fine.
Well, I also think it's funny to think of, like we think it's embarrassing to hide our underwear at the gynecologist when they're like, I've seen it all. Why are you hiding your underwear? Like, I feel like TSA is kind of the same way. They're like, yeah, we hear it at least 100 times a day. So we all need to just not have any shame in our game.
Sure somebody's talked about this, but, like, also, why do we shave? Like, why do we shave?
Oh, I shave every time for the gynecologist. Yeah, every time. I make sure I get the butthole and everything. I get right in there. Every time, because they're like, scoot up. And I'm like, well, now you're going to see my beehole. So I get, well, now I just laser. But anyways, I'm glad you share that with me. So people can watch you, like you do a segment all the time on Good Morning America?
I do, yeah. Or you can listen to Money Rehab every single day. Girl, can you imagine doing this show every day? Yeah. So all the money stuff that's happening, breaking it down. And then I also have a show twice a week called Help Wanted that's career advice with the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine, in addition to Money Rehab.
Holy crap, you really are a boss-ass bitch. That is incredible. You're just doing it all. That's so cool every day. So if people want to learn more.
Financial tips, advice, breaking down like all stuff in the news, helping you decode all this crazy jargon, because I think that's what keeps us out of the conversation. Is 100%. The jargon.
Okay.
It doesn't need to be that way. And this is why I rewrote financial dictionaries in the back of all my books. Maybe this is why I'm 39 and have never been married. And so maybe that's because I was rewriting financial dictionaries on my weekends. I don't know.
So where can people find your books as well?
Wherever books are sold.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow. Good for you. That's really cool. I'm truly going to listen to your podcast because I need to be more confident. And
also sound more confident too. I really do love like talking to a Wall Street douchebag and just like putting him in his place.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed. That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the pod today. I really appreciate you, and you're badass.
Just trying to keep up with you, sister.
Yeah. I'm Kaitlyn Bristowe. Your session is now ending. And if I'm being honest, I wouldn't mind a rating and review.